Captain America DEI did less its entire second weekend than its first single Friday open. That is atrocious. Online. The box office for Captain Falcon America Brave New DEI because it sucks. And we told you this was coming. I was trying to be a little cautious last week, although I told y'all that the second weekend was going to tell the story and it was probably not going to be good. Well, sure enough, it is not good. And as I just showed you a moment ago, it's this sort of stuff right here, this type of cope from these ridiculous fake body accounts that are nothing more than ridiculous shills for Disney and Marvel, if not run by Disney or their marketing partners, which they probably are themselves. That is what we're dealing with here. So be wary of the gaslighting, be wary of the false flagging kind of stuff, or the false flag operations, I should say, in this case, when it comes to media, because it is rife, unfortunately, right now, because Disney is trying to desperately hold on to some sense of cultural viability right now with Marvel. They have an enormous amount of money sunk into this thing. It's way more than $180 million, and I'm going to show you exactly why that is. We're going to prove that with a lot of surrounding evidence we've talked about before, but I'm going to keep reminding people out there, especially all of our new viewers, what we do here. Because what we do here is we put Hollywood through the business and financial lens of reality. Let's go ahead and talk about this for the box office for Captain America DEI. Brave New World. This is the current stand, $289 million. This is through the second weekend. We are now at $141 million at the domestic box office, $148 million at the international. And I want to stipulate how bad it was this weekend. Let's look first at the domestic box office. Last weekend, on its true 3-day, at least with Thursday previews, I should say, not including the Monday federal holiday President's Day, $88.8 million. That fell a whopping 68% to $28.2 million, and that is as of the estimates right now. Repeat, those are estimates. Now, what have I always said about estimates when it comes to box office? You have to look at the trend lines to determine if the estimated weekend haul is going to be one of three things: either on the money, under projecting, or over projecting. Now, as of right now, given the trend lines with this movie and projections coming into the weekend that were not met, it suggests that this number is probably either relatively on the money or, if anything, maybe over projecting, meaning that the actual box office may come in less than the $28.2 million estimated currently. There's still a chance that we could see a 70% weekend over weekend 1 to 2 drop. Now, it gets even crazier because when you actually look at the daily box office performance, I want you to look at February 14th. Now, February 14th was the first day this movie opened, but that also included that $40.9 million, an estimated $12 million in Thursday previews. If we look at True Friday to True Friday, this number gets horribly worse. That means on its True Friday, on its true first full day of opening last week, minus the Thursday previews that were baked in, that means on Friday last week, this movie did, guess what, about $28.9 million. That means at its current estimate right now for its entire second weekend, that Captain America DEI did less its entire second weekend than its first single Friday open. That is atrocious. That's horrible. But something, frankly, that was quite predictable and expected, and we told you that it was probably going to be the case. I was hoping to see, given its relatively soft start for a Marvel movie, a big blockbuster Marvel movie, considering the MCU's box office performance history, that if this movie was actually able to come in somewhere in the realm of what was suggested coming into this weekend, then maybe there was a very small outside chance that this thing could sustain itself to look less embarrassing at the end of its run. Not to say that it was suddenly going to break even or make money, but to be less embarrassing than what it now turns out to look like it will be. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's look here once again. Captain America Brave New World compared to the movie that it has been compared to up to this point, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which was one of the most dismally performing Marvel entries in the history of the franchise, especially when you calculate inflation adjustments for all the movies for the 10-plus years that came before it. And you can see right now the gap continues to widen. We told you before, in this case, that when you started out with a gap of roughly $16 million between Ant-Man 3 and Captain America DEI on its opening weekend, that gap then spread to 17 million, and from 17 to 20 million, and then from 20 to 21, 22 million, and now that gap stands at nearly $26 million, meaning that it's not even pacing from opening to hold the gap and narrow the percentage variance between it and Ant-Man 3. That gap, that failure, is actually growing. It's getting worse and worse by the day. And there's no getting around this. When we looked at the second weekend projections, let's look here. Captain America Brave New World to hold the number one with a $30+ million second weekend. Now, this was as of February 19th. So just about 4 days ago, right? This was Wednesday, Thursday deadline calculation for what the weekend would look like. And they were projecting that Captain America would hang on with a roughly $30+ million second weekend. Now, that could mean 31, that could mean 32, that could mean 35, could have meant 38. But they were settled on $30+ million. Now, if it had actually struck that mark, then we were still looking at, on the low end of that scale, somewhere around a 65% loss weekend one to weekend two. But it looks like, again, right now, as that has been updated on Deadline, that they are now looking at a $28 million second weekend. And the problem there, and I'll show you to go over to that, where they are now, Captain America Brave New World nears $300 million global. Now, again, this is after 10 full days. And only about 30 some odd million of international box office performance happened this entire weekend over all international territories, according to Nancy Tartaglione. Now, remember, when they update these numbers today, they're updating it for roughly the entire week of international. International does not update on the numbers as frequently. It updates about once a week, okay, depending on when they get the data. Box Office Mojo tries to update it a bit more frequently. But let's go here to Nancy's just to kind of show you. Mufasa hitting about 700 million worldwide as the kids movie tends to leg out a little bit more fervently over time. Again, kids movies perform differently than MCU titles. We continue to remind people that. But the kids movie that's winning right now, this animated title, Ni Za 2, which is a Chinese movie, almost $2 billion in animated feature, and that's really all in China alone. But Brave New World, we're looking at roughly a $28 million haul now, lower, almost 10% lower than the lowest end of the already dismally projected second weekend range, which has got to be a nightmare. And nothing is helping Disney right now, of course, because this $180 million figure that they keep trying to tout through their marketing partners, through the lying media. Here's the thing. It's not really lying, right? Right. And that's what makes it okay. It's okay. We can keep touting that the budget for this movie was $180 million. Why? Because somewhere at some point, somebody at Disney told Variety or somebody else that the budget was $180 million. But as we continue to remind folks, that is not what they spend. A budget is just a budget. It's an idea. In the beginning, when this movie was greenlit. By the way, this movie was greenlit almost 4 years ago now, or at least it was announced almost 4 years ago now. And it's sat through multiple production delays, multiple rewrites, reshoots, re-edits, re-VFX, everything, principal photography and post-production, both of which are very, very, very expensive. And it's not something that's going to hit even if it had just done perfectly. Its first shoot, its first edit, its first set of post-production VFX. Even if all of that had gone flawlessly, there was absolutely nothing in Marvel's history to suggest that the stated budget of $180 million in this case is something that Disney actually would have been able to hit on the mark, because every one of them in the past has gone way over. Every one of them. And not by a few $1 million. We're talking about by 20, 30, 40, 50 plus percent in many cases, sometimes even more. This movie is doomed, and Captain America, Brave New World, is staring down the barrel on the best case scenario of about a $100 million loss for the House of Mouse, and at worst, perhaps pushing $200 million, depending on how bad things go from here. But if we look at the trajectory for this film, it only looks like it's going from bad to worse.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.